vegans are
so
getting
good.
out of hand here, putting fish in coffee.
Yeah.
What's next? Gay marriage, cats and dogs living together, total anarchy.
We're on the path.
All right, so it looks like it's live. Let me refresh. I'll give you the link.
Sweet.
I'm going to go ahead and mute the audio sources. the things. Did you have the link to the stream?
Yeah, but I closed it because I'm probably gonna fuck it up and like have it open, and then you'll hear
Okay.
the audio of it. And
I'm just gonna assume. Yeah,
don't
it's up.
trust me with anything technological.
It's up.
Great.
Banter House is the stream is probably, I guess, a little bit behind, right?
Yeah, I think it's like a 10 or 15-second delay.
All right, so let's. Just want to make sure it actually goes. There we go. Look at that. It's behind.
We made it. You had said when we chatted earlier that you kind of didn't want to open anything up with like an introduction or something. You just wanted to go straight into it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think part of this is going to be, you're going to be talking a lot about yourself and your projects and your careers, and I think that's, I mean, if you want to do a bit of an introduction, let's do that.
Well, I just wanted to touch on what you had mentioned last time.
Okay.
And
Well, I am going to say your sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead. It's your podcast.
No, it was on a delay. I didn't realize I was interrupting you. So yeah, so you're Joseph Ehrenpreis. You're a guitarist. Thank you for doing this with me. This is really cool.
Of course.
So, what were we just talking about? Juggalos?
We were talking about juggalos, but somehow that segued into this idea of the church of music.
Yeah.
The cultist aspects of rituals and how ritual is such an empowered part of our day as musicians. Like, and it may be a reason why people who set these aesthetics that are so intriguing, like Kanye West or the Insane Clown Posse, can get these immense followings and like establish arts in a lot of mediums like fashion and music and culture. So I think that's a fascinating prospect as a musician, to like get to a point where your followers are so devoted to what you're doing that they'll just accept almost anything that you do.
Yeah, and in the context of like especially like superstars, like pop superstars, it's like the whole O.J. Simpson thing. It's the trial was bungled, I guess, and that's why the result was the way that it was. It was the fault of the prosecution. But I mean, people were defending him. I mean, if you take a cursory look at the details, he did it. I mean, it's like, but his fans were able to just, no, there's no way this guy could have done it. But this is someone that they don't know. Most people who are fans of some, like a sports star or a musician, have never met them. And if they have met them, it's at like some VIP meet and greet behind a show, and you're going to shake the dude's hand and 5 minutes of, oh my God, I love your music. And then you're just going to leave, and he's not going to remember you because you're one of like 100 people he's going to see that night and 1,000 people he's going to see that week,
Yeah. I have to tell you a story about shaking hands. So I don't think this will ever happen again post-COVID, but I had the opportunity to see Neil deGrasse Tyson speak. And he was doing a speech. I think it was right around the time that he had remade the Cosmos. And I had happened to be in the bathroom before his speech, and me as an awkward teenager kind of got stage fright. Like, I got butterflies seeing someone that I really looked up to at the time, and Neil was peeing next to me in one of the urinals, and I tried to shake his hand while he was taking a piss.
Oh no!
And he did it. He was such a sport.
That's great.
That would never happen ever again because COVID.
Right. So. Yeah. Do you think we're gonna get to a point where we shake hands again?
No. Oh, I think that's a practice of the past. Never again.
Do you want it to come back?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
What better form of camaraderie is there than like making a handshake with a friend or doing pinky swears? Yeah.
I think one of the really one of the really big impacts of the pandemic is the lack of like interpersonal touch, it just in the form of like a handshake or just hugging your friend when you see them, it's it's crazy how much I miss that, you know, and it's stuff that I took for granted. I don't think I ever realized how much that was necessary for my just sense of well-being, you know, and it's been really hard to kind of get past that, which I guess ties into the sort of bigger conversation of, you know, what this whole pandemic has kind of done and how that's affecting everybody, not just musicians, but in ways that maybe we didn't really anticipate a pandemic could, you know.
Yeah. I mean, there's one thing to say about being prepared for a pandemic structurally, like our government being prepared and having supplies and first aid kits and bottled water and canned foods and all those things. But there's another thing that seems to be not on the forefront of discussion, which is empathy.
Mm.
And particularly among creative people who spend a lot of time alone already with themselves, who kind of need to maintain a certain level of well-being and
Mm-hmm.
mindfulness to continue on with what they're doing. Um, to have an absence of any human connection, and on top of that feel the pressure of potentially becoming sick or getting your family members sick, like those things really weigh down on us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm really appreciative that you're starting to put this together, because when you reached out to me, I felt like, oh my gosh, I haven't heard from Joe in a few years, but damn, I'd love to know what you're up to.
Yeah.
I'd love to know like how things are going in Denver, and if you still had your long hair, and what kind of cello shredding you've been up to. So like,
Sorry to disappoint on the hair front.
no, it looks great.
Thank
And
you.
You got a goatee going on.
Yeah.
It's a
I
big
just haven't
change.
trimmed in a while, as you can tell. Yeah, you know, and I it's funny because I was looking back through our Facebook conversation, and I didn't realize it actually was back in April that I reached out to you. It was actually quite a while ago, I believe it was because I saw a post you made about your recording project, and I just was like, oh my God, that's right. You know, Joseph Ehrenpreis, this guy playing really wacky guitar, you know, and I just remembered, like, you know, having really cool conversations with you and really enjoying watching you play. And then I was like, well, you know, why not record it and fucking send it out? I mean, yeah, I mean, so that's, but I also was, even just like, that was like what, 2 months in, even then I was missing that kind of interpersonal, you know, musical relationship that I had with people. And I just want to keep up that conversation because I think it's really important. And most of the time we spend as musicians is by ourselves in a practice room, or by yourself in a recording studio, which is a much higher pressure situation, right? And it's the time that we get to like spend with other people playing, or just play, or even if you're playing a solo show in front of people, it's that time where you get to share what you're doing with someone else. That kind of makes it all worth it. You know, there's sort of a really small amount of payoff, but actually it translates into being super worth spending the, you know, hundreds of hours alone by yourself. You know.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about this and like what the purpose of decompression might be, like going for a walk or talking to a friend, because ultimately that doesn't really lead towards a completed recording, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But in musical terms, when we perform, we're actually really making ourselves very vulnerable, and recording especially, because when you're done with a recording, you're kind of letting a piece of yourself within whatever medium you're working on out into the world for people to judge. But I think we undervalue that dyad of feedback, even if it's negative,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes those types of feedbacks can catalyze you and push you to a level that you didn't even know you had within you. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, in doing this project, I've kind of come to terms with myself. Like I had a lot of fear and doubt in what I was working on, which is the first of its kind.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really have backing from anyone except for the composers, maybe my parents a little bit, and the grant that I received,
Mm.
where they saw a potential. But
Right.
with just like a lot of other grants, sometimes, especially with art grants, the participants don't finish their projects, and
Mm-hmm.
at times I felt like maybe in this, maybe it's not worth it. It's causing me too much stress. But then I get a message from you, and you're saying like, "Hey, I don't even know what you're doing, but I'm interested." And that type of feedback is the type of feedback that pushed me. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, people are actually they want to see what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
They want to see if I fail. Want to see if I make something beautiful
Mm-hmm.
or that connects with them." And ultimately, that process is more important to me than anything that I finished. Like, I just want connection
Mm.
ultimately. And
I'm really interested in the idea of the process versus the results. But before we talk about that, can you talk a little bit about the project, like what it is and why it's kind of the first of its kind, I think was the phrase you used?
yeah, of course. Time for me to bloat my ego, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, um, let me just preface this by saying that, of course, there have been new compositions that have been written for my instrument. They may not have been published, they may have not been written down, but my goal from the moment I started playing the 8-string Brahms guitar was to create a repertoire for it, whether that be through a transcription or through playing the music of my friends, or even just bringing it to a level where it could be comprehended in a standard, like a classical standard.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sure there are tons of instruments that have music that may be classical, but it doesn't necessarily reach the standards of the institution.
Mm.
So my goal was to say, this is important, and this music has a lot of value. Um, and I can say, and I can express myself through this vehicle. So I've been fortunate enough to work with really wonderful composers. The first set came from uh, a group of composers I met at a new music festival in Vermont called New Music on the Point. And from there, I met composers that would ultimately form the Tessellot Collective,
Mm.
which is a Eurocentric but international collective of composers based all around the world. Um, Also, I had the opportunity to work with composers from Rice University in Texas, the Conservatory of Music, the Juilliard School, and I also was really fortunate to work with one composer who's getting his PhD at Princeton now, and
Mm.
he's mostly an orchestrator. So the ability to play orchestral music on a solo instrument is
Yeah.
a dream come true,
That's
really. Um,
fascinating. Yeah, it reminds me
yeah,
of when I was in undergrad. We had a master class with the principal, the then principal cellist. I'm not sure if he's principal cellist anymore. Of the Jacksonville Symphony, and he played. Do you know the Handel Halvorsen duet?
yeah.
Yeah, he transcribed that duet for one cello and played it,
Whoa.
and it was ridiculous. I mean, it just blew my mind because I've it's a really famous duet, and if you're at all interested in string music, which I was from a pretty young age, you encounter it relatively early on. So at this point, I knew the duet. I had learned, I played it a little bit with both parts, um, and to see this you know duets are hard. I mean, it's writing a duet is difficult because you only have really two voices, especially when it's string instruments. And you can kind of put some double stops in there, but you can't make it all double stops. And to watch this guy play this piece and get these two voices to really speak out of one instrument was absolutely mind blowing. So, is there a piece on the album that is one of these orchestral transcriptions for guitar?
It's not a transcription. Actually,
Okay.
there's an interesting story. There's one piece written by a composer named Sam Wu. Um, I think his most recent school is the Juilliard School, but I'm not entirely sure where he's at right now. But he's from Shanghai, and he wrote a piece for me called "The End of Snow is Nirvana," based on a Zen meditation.
Mm.
Um, what's interesting is since he has written it for me in 2017, he's repurposed it into a harp piece, and then eventually into a ballet. So
Wow.
actually, the process went in a reverse from him. He expanded the piece and
Interesting.
brought it somewhere completely different. So my version is the way I like to think of it is more of like an intimate outlook on the music, and then obviously if you're orchestrating something, you're kind of adding a lot of color and depth that you can't get on a solo instrument.
Right. Yeah.
But,
So
yeah,
while we're talking about it, can you talk more about the Brahms guitar and why it's really different than a sort of standard guitar?
yeah. Can I give you some context on how I started playing it too?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah. So at the time, I had actually dropped out of music school. I was at the Cleveland Institute of Music, and I was studying with a very prominent guitarist named Jason Vio. Um, I was really uncomfortable in that setting,
Mm.
uh, especially because I didn't really love playing the guitar. um, I felt like my repertoire was really limited, and I hadn't been exposed to very much new music at that
Mm.
point
Mm.
either. So I was like, oh wow, I'm gonna play transcriptions of Bach and whatever second or third tier composers existed in the 19th century. Hooray! Like I was really dissatisfied. So
Yeah.
I enrolled at the Art Institute of Chicago. I started studying sound design with what kind of he was an opera composer named William Harper, and he was leading the sound program at the Art Institute of Chicago. And at the time, Spotify was just coming out,
Mm.
and I became totally obsessed with Bach's solo sonatas and partitas for violin.
Mhm. Mhm.
And on Spotify, you have this amazing ability to just listen to like every performer that's ever lived play those pieces.
Yeah.
And I just happened to stumble upon Paul Galbraith's recording, who's the inventor, alongside the luthier David Rubio, of the Brahms guitar.
Mm.
And through this transcription, he added so much depth and counterpoint, and there's like horrific moments in the chaconne, and it just
Mhm.
moved me so much. And I like kept listening to this recording, and I had an hour commute there and back on the train, and I would just listen and listen. And at some point, I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna email him. And I just sent him a cold email, and he put me in contact with a luthier named Martin Woodhouse who
Wow.
built me my instrument. And since then, I've been playing for 6 years now.
Mm.
That was my kind of turning point. And the instrument is really interesting because it's a modernization of a Renaissance instrument called the orpherion,
Mm.
which also has slanted frets.
Mm.
And uh, what differentiates it from a normal 8-string guitar is that it has a higher range and a lower range. So you extend the range by a fourth to A above the high E on the standard guitar, and down a fourth to B, or down a fifth to A,
Mm.
the low standard E.
Wow.
Um, as a result, you get these amazing textures,
Mhm.
and you can create flourishes and downward sweeps, and just it's almost an entirely new instrument at that point.
Mhm. Yeah. Um. What was the transition like from a standard 6-string guitar? I assume you were playing just standard six-string classical guitar. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. So what was the process of transitioning from that standard guitar to the Brahms guitar?
Um, Actually, I had a really interesting theory teacher at the time named Michael Kuderka, who was interested in neuroscience,
Mm.
and he had this theory that you can make neuro mappings of the guitar. So what he would have me do is print out blank fretboards and fill out like an entire mode
Oh.
on the fretboard, and then
Okay.
just try and improvise over it. So what I did was I added 2 columns to that,
Uh
or
huh.
2 rows to that
Right.
sheet, and I started filling those out before I even had my instrument.
Mm.
And I would just like sit and meditate and look at these things and try and imagine myself playing just off of those sheets.
Mm.
And from there, I actually, the first day I had the instrument, I started playing the sonatas and partitas. Um,
Just jumped in feet first, huh?
yep. So
Love
I,
it.
I I wish I could kind of detail my process more, but I think I was just manic or something, just eagerly awaiting every day, like checking my phone, checking the tracking, like
Wow.
when's it coming, when's it coming, when's it
Yeah.
coming, and then by the time I had it, I already like started making repertoire in my mind.
Is
So
is the is so I first of all, why is it called the Brahms guitar? And second of all, you play it in a pretty interesting posture. Is that standard for that instrument, or is that something that you've come up with?
yeah, those are both great questions. The reason why it's called the Brahms guitar is because Paul Galbraith, most prominent performer on the classical end of the instrument, he utilized this instrument to make an arrangement of Brahms' Opus 21A, which is variations for piano solo. And he that was his first transcription, so he
Mm,
just dubbed it the Brahms guitar, and it stuck.
okay.
There have been other adopters of the instrument who have tried to rename it and call it like the Norfarion, like the Nouveau Orfarion or something.
Okay.
Um, but I don't know if those other names have stuck. And then it was actually Paul who also came up with the cello position, but me myself, my early training as a musician included playing the cello.
Ah.
So for me, it just felt like a seamless transition.
And
And
I
I don't know
knew
if you've
I
seen
knew
guitar. It
I knew there was something about you. I was like, this guy knows what's up. It's because you started on cello. That's why.
it's
No,
why we
just
vibe
kidding.
so much, right?
Just kidding.
No, no, no. It's true. It's true. The cello is the closest to the range of the human voice. Is
Mm.
that true?
Um, I, I'm not exactly sure. I think that's a little bit. Mm-mm. I think it's probably closest to the range of the average male voice.
Mm.
Um, but like I was working with a well, I wasn't working with well, yeah, I was working with I was working with a vocalist yesterday. We were playing a mass together, and at one point I was like, I'm just gonna double her on the melody, and it was actually quite high, but I don't think she was really pushing it in her range. It sounded like it was really comfortably in her range. She probably could have gone an extra octave plus higher, and I was pretty far at the end. I mean, I was not I would say I was maybe like in the upper quarter of the range of the instrument. So I think it's probably closer to the average male voice. Um, yeah, I'm not really. That's one of those sort of like just one of those things that's repeated a lot that I have just kind of accepted, and I but I'm actually not really convinced that that's true. Just like the idea of music being a universal language, I'm really not convinced that that's true at all. I think that music is universal in the same way that language is universal. Like everybody has some form of language, and yeah, you can find exceptions, but we're talking about 99.9999% of people. Even if you don't have the ability to speak or the ability to hear, you can develop language. You can read, you can write, you can do sign language, that kind of thing. And I think music is universal in the same way, in the sense that pretty much every culture does music. Maybe there's like a one island of like untouched, 1,000 untouched, people somewhere out there that have zero idea that the rest of the world's going on and they don't do music. Maybe that's true. But
I would doubt it. I would doubt it. There's so much sound. There's so much ambient sound in life that
yeah.
it'd be impossible to not organize sound at some point.
Yeah. And I studied, when I was in grad school, I studied Tuvan and Mongolian. Well, mainly Tuvan, but a little bit of Mongolian music for a couple of years. And their music is entirely related to the sound of the natural world. All of their throat singing styles, even their instruments, it's all directly connected to natural sounds. So you have styles of throat singing that are literally like a man singing while he's riding a horse, and it utilizes the name for stirrup, and so it has this kind of galloping effect to it. You have all of these names are really complicated to pronounce, and I'm not going to try right now, make myself look stupid. But you have another style, which is the sound of a small stream bubbling over rocks. And there's a story of Christopher Levin, who's pretty much the main musical anthropologist who's studied Tuvan music, where he had he met like this master of this. It's called, I'm going to go ahead and try to say it's Borbognadir. I'm probably murdering that. But he was introduced to this master of this style, and he was like, I want you to like, can you really get into this with me? And the guy was like, well, it doesn't make sense to do it unless we're at the place where I'm sort of trying to echo the sound, which is a mind-blowing concept in and of itself. Like, you're not going to understand this unless you're next to the thing I am trying to imitate, right? And then the story
that kind of exists still. Like if you hear music from New York City, you're probably not going to get it unless you live in New York City.
That's actually a really good point. Yeah, I mean, so like Balinese Gamelan, it's like when you're in Bali and you're going to see Balinese groups in Bali, it all of a sudden just makes so much more sense. But yeah, so this guy takes them way out to this stream that he really likes, hours and hours it took them, and then he spent an extra hour or so arranging stones in the stream so he could slightly manipulate the sound, and then he sings next to it. And there's a recording out there, and it comes with Ted Levin's book, which is called Where Rivers and Mountains Sing, and it's astounding. I mean, it makes total sense. So yeah, I actually would agree with you. It's probably super unlikely that there's cultures that don't have music, because we're designed to imitate sound. We do it all the time. You know, we do voices. We you know, mimic animals, that kind of thing. We're actually pretty good at it generally as a species. Maybe not me or someone else, but you know, like Frank Caliendo has this I don't know if you know that comedian. He has this Morgan Freeman impression that is spot on. When you if you just listen to that recording, you'd be like, that's Morgan Freeman. You would never question. You know, it's incredible. But anyway, I don't know how I got on that little tangent there. But
mother.
What was that?
Tell that to my tone deaf mother. She didn't teach me anything about that. But yeah, just going back, in the same way that guy was arranging stones to manipulate the sound a little bit, I added 2 strings to my guitar, and I started playing like a cellist again. And in working with these living composers, I kind of didn't even give them guidelines to write for me. I just wanted them to make, for this first iteration of the new music series, I just wanted them to give me their first impression. For some of those pieces, I have to say, and I'm sorry to say, some of them just didn't pan out, and that's okay. It's trial and error. Yeah. That's what good science is all about. Yeah. But luckily, they're really open-minded people take on this project, and a lot of the pieces turned out amazingly. I would say that they're incomparable. There's nothing else in the guitar literature that's even remotely close to what they wrote for me. And I had used David Starobin's model of new music for guitar, which is something he started in the 80s, where he was working with like the best living composers at the time, like Milton Babbitt and Elliott Carter. He was commissioning works to try and create new repertoire for the instrument. In the same way, I want to do that for the Brahms guitar. And I'm open to playing any composer's music, at least reading it and giving them feedback, in the same way that I want feedback, in that dyad sense. Ultimately, I'm just really over the moon with the work that I've been able to make on this thing, because I think it really captured the potential and the capabilities of this instrument, utilizing the entire range, the texture, how resonant it can be with the wooden resonance box that the cello pin goes into. Like, all of those things make the essential qualities of the Brahms guitar.
What can you explain what you mean by the resonance box that the end pin goes into? I'm not really sure if I understand.
I can actually show it to you.
That would be great. I'd love that. Such a cool instrument. This is, I think I said this the other day. Oh. Yeah. So this wooden box takes on the responsibilities of a lot of the low frequencies to keep them ringing. Oh, interesting. Okay. And I know cellists do that sometimes too when they play concertos. They'll like put their posts on a big block of wood, and then it kind of resonates in the whole hall. Yeah, there's what a lot of cellists, you know, if you're playing a concerto with like a symphony or something, a lot of cellists will use they'll sit on a resonating box that kind of looks like the conductor's podium, and I believe that most of them are constructed to not only amplify the sound, but to clarify it a little bit, but also a lot of symphony halls, these stages are actually intended to sort of increase the resonance of the sound, especially for low instruments, which is why a lot of times, you'll see cellists just stab their end pin into the floor instead of using a donut or a rock stop, because there is so much resonance in the end pin, as I'm sure you discovered with your guitar, to the point where, like, I'm actually getting in. Well, I'm saving up for it because it's ungodly expensive. But I'm getting a titanium end pin put in my cello because titanium tends to brighten up the sound because it's so dense. It actually sends the sound back into the instrument, whereas carbon fiber, which is what I have now, is so light it actually does absorb. It's very, very acoustically free, so it does absorb some of the sound. Now, if you're on stage, maybe a titanium end pin is not really what you want because you're going to get that transference into the stage. But I'm never playing on orchestral stages. I'm in a choir loft with carpet on the walls, or I'm in my bedroom or something. So and my cello tends to be on the well, it's actually gotten louder actually in the past couple of years, but it's tended to be on the quiet side and the kind of warm, thick side, which I like. But sometimes I do want to, especially in the low end, kind of brighten it up. So
Yeah.
I would love
I've
to try that thing out
experimented.
sometime.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure you could have one made for you too. It wasn't too expensive, and it adds to the depth of the sound for sure.
Mm.
I've also experimented with different types of cello spikes. Like I have a few that are wood. I have
Mm.
one carbon fiber. What I've noticed is that the shorter the pin gets, the more resonant it is.
Yes.
So what I've been doing is sitting on a really short chair when I play, and that allows me to have the shortest possible length on my end pin.
Yeah, yeah. I've. It's funny you say that. I've actually moved towards a shorter end pin over the years. Part of it is just because I actually kind of like having it pretty low. The back of the neck almost sits right on my shoulder. It's literally about that far away from it. But it does let me feel like I can get a little bit more around the instrument, especially when playing in higher positions. I feel a little more comfortable. Whereas having a longer end pin and it sitting higher means I'm sort of, instead of reaching down, I'm more reaching out this way. And that's a
Yeah,
lot more uncomfortable to play in. But if you watch like Rostropovich, I mean, he was really, really big. He was like, what is he, like 6'6" or something like that? He's got this end pin out to here. He's like sitting back. He's playing. It's almost like his strings are flat. But
yeah,
he was also playing an older instrument that may not have been quite as projecting. I think he was on a Guarneri or something like that.
yeah.
Um,
I actually know there's a contemporary player named Gautier Capucon.
hmm,
He's French, and he plays the same way, and I think he's playing on one of those instruments as
hmm,
well.
yeah,
So it may very well have something to do with the construction of their instrument, but
yeah.
the aesthetics of our playing are continually developing because luthier is another thing that's not dead.
No.
It's well and alive,
Oh my
and
God, yeah.
we should be open-minded to innovation. We shouldn't just stick on tradition with that.
100%. Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement. I'm looking for a new cello, and I have been for a little while now. And I will sell. I'll tell you straight up, most of the modern instruments that I play absolutely blow the older instruments out of the water. I mean, I went down to Robertson and Sons a couple of years ago, and I told them, listen, man, like I'm not looking to buy anything now. What I want to do is I want to get an idea of what does a $200,000 cello sound like. What does a decent $15,000 cello sound like? So then when I get my price range, I can actually have an idea of, hey, this thing is really worth the 15 grand, or this one's really not. I could, I can get a $5,000 cello that sounds better, that kind of thing. And I said, just line them up. Don't tell me the age. Don't tell me the maker. Just let me add them. And so what I did was I kind of just sort of rearranged them as I played them. And it's like, I really love this. I really hate this. And I was really surprised to find that I vastly preferred the modern cellos. I was under the assumption that the older ones, because they're played in, blah, 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 and it really didn't pan out that way. And there's also been the really famous studies where there's issues with these studies, so it's not really something that I take for truth at this point. But there's these famous studies where they get both musicians and non-musicians, and they do blind listening tests with Stradivariuses and Guarneris and Amatis, and then modern instruments, and they vastly, even the professional musicians vastly prefer the modern instruments. They have better projection, and they're just they're just beefy. Matt
Yeah.
Zalkin from DU plays on a more modern instrument. I believe he plays on a more modern instrument.
I
But
mean, it would make sense, right? The demands of performers have gone up,
yeah,
and the instruments have not changed.
and
So,
concert halls have gotten bigger too
yeah.
in the past 100 years.
So it would be unfair to expect those instruments to be able to line up to something that's designed particularly to play something that didn't exist at that time.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm all for supporting living luthiers, living composers, living luthiers.
Hmm.
Gotta prop them up.
Yeah.
They're the
Plus they,
best. Shout
plus
out to
they,
Martin Woodhouse.
plus they can be cheaper. They
Yeah,
can be
and
a lot cheaper.
they'll customize the instrument to your needs too. So
Yeah, and this cello I've had since I was about 14. It was made for me by a luthier in Gainesville named Jan van Rooyen. And until I moved out here, he was the guy I took it to. And so it was like I was able to take my cello to its maker. I mean, he knew that instrument inside and out, and it was great to just bring it back to him. And I remember this cello, and whatever, and to see that he was happy that I was still playing it, and so now I've had it for like 14 years, I think.
well,
So yeah, it's but you don't get that experience obviously with the Stradivarius or a 100-year-old instrument. It's just not possible. So
yeah.
yeah, what's
Not
the
that you wouldn't turn one down, but
no, absolutely not. I mean, if I stumbled across like a 100-year-old cello that just blew my mind and it was in my price range, sure, I'd take it. But I also kind of acknowledge that you don't have to relegate yourself to these kind of really old instruments that, yeah, sure, they may be, especially if they've been well maintained and if they've been played consistently for 100 years by good players, they're probably really superb instruments. But you can get something like that from modern instruments. There's this guy, Paul Krentz. If you see that on my cello, there's that little black dot down there by the tailpiece. So it's a Krentz modulator. There's a big magnet inside the instrument, and it just pinches this part on the top, and it gets rid of my wolf, but I can also use it to kind of subtly change my tone in some ways. He has a process now where he basically you take a brand new cello to him, and he hooks it up to this machine. He does it with violins and basses and stuff like that too. And he hooks it up to a machine, and he basically gets it to play every note in its range, and he just lets it sit there for weeks. 24 hours a day playing every pitch in its range. And basically the idea is that it's like 10 years of aging in a week,
Wow.
And people swear by that process. They're like, listen, I took this instrument to him. We hooked up to the machine a week later. It's like nothing else. It's like a brand new instrument, Well, I guess, sorry, it's not like a brand new instrument in the sense that it sounds like it's been played in, but it sounds like a completely different, better instrument. And that kind of technology is that's the kind of thing that a lot of people don't understand, because they look at a violin and they go, well, this Amati looks the same as this modern one here, but they can be completely different, really, at the end of the day, as far as we can use micrometers to get the one section of the top. Oh, it's 0.4 millimeters. I really want 0.35. You can do that, and those kinds of nuances really change things. I want to talk about playing transcripted music on your instrument. You brought up the partitas before. Obviously, mechanically and sonically, violin and guitar pretty different.
Couldn't be any different. I mean, guitar is not a sustaining instrument. It's just not in your wheelhouse. I mean, you could kind of pluck really fast, but it's not quite the same thing. And so, with music that's written for an instrument that has a curved bridge, only 4 strings, that you can sustain notes, how do you go about that process of taking those capabilities and sort of working around them, because you can't actually achieve that kind of sound on your instrument? Yeah. The great Miroslav Tadic taught me something, that the best way you can compose is to be aware of your limitations. And I actually feel like when I play written music, even if it's contemporary music and I know the composer, I have to take the role of the composer a little bit, because no one knows the instrument essentially except for me and maybe Paul and a few others that are playing it. But my process kind of goes, first, as you said, the guitar is a pluck string instrument. So that tells us that the minute that the note sounds, it's already decaying. Guitarists have a death wish, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing you need to acknowledge. You have no sustain, unless you're cheating and you're using a sustain pedal or something.
Right.
But then it changes the texture of your sound. So you can take a heightened moment, say you're playing a seventh or something in a heightened phrase, and you can fill that out with your sense of counterpoint. You can bring out and highlight certain harmonies, or you can take a very sparse approach, play it exactly as it's written, and utilize techniques like over ringing strings and natural resonance, sympathetic
Mm-hmm.
resonance, to achieve what the violin is implying in that moment.
Okay.
So
So
once
there's
you're
a
aware,
sorry, go ahead.
once you're aware of all of those factors, then you can kind of apply your own personal taste and knowledge to creating the transcription.
So it's really not as simple as like, here are the pitches, here's the rhythm, I'm going to play it on my instrument, but like kind of you're doing some like theoretical analysis of the work and trying to figure out what is the composer doing in this particular instance, and how can I achieve that goal, but in a different way, because I just can't do what he's asking on the instrument.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
Could you maybe show an example of what I think I understand what that process is like, but could you maybe show us a little example of that?
Sure. So I had a transcription of Ravel, and Ravel has a very famous piano prelude that utilizes a doubling of notes in the right hand.
Is
So
that
he has
the death of an infant one that you're talking about, or is
No,
that that's different?
this one is just a short prelude. It's like a minute long.
All right.
But the way that I counteracted that was by just turning the top line into harmonics and creating like a moving dyad underneath. So maybe if you start to think of this in a texture of 3 rather than a texture of 1, then you get a very interesting kind of approach to this music. So I'll play it for you.
That'd be great. I'd love that. Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
I'm gonna try something out. I'm gonna try and switch mics. So
Okay.
hopefully this works.
Take your time. Take your time. I think we have, like, well.
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
It looks like if you include myself, we got 2 people watching. This is great. Whoever's watching besides me,
Bingo, don't let there be dead air.
toss us a comment. Yeah. Well, so if anyone's listening, for what it's worth, the real there's the real impetus behind this kind of a thing is, as I said it kind of at the beginning, musicians spend a pretty lonely existence. We spend a lot of time by ourselves in a practice room, and the payoff is the performances, the jam sessions, even the rehearsals with other people. But with closed venues, canceled tours, and extreme social distancing, a lot of us are really missing that. And I want to keep the conversation up. There's so much to talk about with music. It's not dead. Everyone says classical music is dead. They're fools. They don't know what they're talking about. It's not dead. There's people like Joseph out there who are doing, who are spanning 300 years of music, and doing really incredible things. And it's not just that he plays a really goofy guitar. He's got an incredible sense of emotion and expression in his music. In the description is links to Joseph's social media. I really encourage you guys, go follow him. Listen to stuff on his YouTube. I spent about an hour yesterday just going through his YouTube. He's got tons of stuff, man. Super cool. I really love the shakuhachi flute improvisation. Absolutely beautiful. I listened to that one like 4 times. It was really incredible. So go check him out. And if you are listening, if it's not just me, maybe toss me a comment. Maybe if you want us to talk about something, let us know. I would love to kind of include more people in the conversation, whether you are a musician or not. Talk to us. Joseph, are you ready, buddy?
Just a moment. I need to
Sure.
tune.
Okay. Anyway, what else can we talk about? I really like talking about music a lot. I'm trying to get more people that I can quote unquote interview, although I don't really want to do a sit down 60-minute style, no keep on topic It's bullshit.
All right, I'm ready for you.
All right. What you got for us?
So this is a prelude by Maurice Ravel. I find that this piece captures the essence of French Impressionism almost better than any other miniature from the time.
All right. Cool.
And the translation to the French markings are slowly, expressively, freely.
Mm.
My own marking says soft touch.
All right. Love it. That was fantastic. That was beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much. Wow, that was incredible. Um, I love this idea of miniatures. In music, I know that a lot of writers often, like people who write literature, often set themselves limits, like I'm going to write a 2-sentence horror story, or something like that. Because the idea is that if you can encapsulate a feeling, if you can, even as surface level as it may be, in 2 sentences, then you've got that feeling, and then you can then extrapolate on it. And so I love the idea of, for both composers and performers, to have these kind of miniatures where the idea is not to sort of expound on this, super long, complicated idea, but just to take it and sort of summarize it. If you can do that, then you've got it down. It's like teaching. It's like if you can clearly explain and demonstrate what you're getting at in a couple of sentences in a couple of seconds, then you really kind of have a deep understanding of that thing. As counterintuitive as that is, it seems like the deeper the understanding, the more in depth, the more length you'd have to kind of engage in. But I think it can be the opposite. It's like if I asked you like, what does forte mean?
Loud.
Just loud, right? You ask a 9-year-old what does forte mean. It's like, oh, it's like really big. It's like loud. It's like it's rarely ever it's just loud. Just play loud. But
Yeah, exactly.
but we also acknowledge it's not as simple as just playing loud, right? Forte has a lot more depth than that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Thanks for playing, dude. I really appreciate that. It was
Yeah, of course.
fantastic.
And I think like another way, I always like to make comparisons between food and music. I think they kind of actually have pretty close parallels. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're making a soup, maybe that was like the stock of the soup. You
Mm.
get it.
Mm.
That's the flavor.
Mm-hmm.
You get what you get. So yeah, that's the way I think about that little prelude. It's a stock.
I love the food analogies too. I use it all the time. It's hilarious you say that. One of my favorites is this is based on a true story, actually. When I was in college, I bought a jar of peanut butter, creamy peanut butter, and I made a sandwich or something. I can't remember. Maybe I just did a spoonful or something, and there was one little piece of peanut in there. Like somebody messed up at the factory, and the creamy peanut butter got one little piece of crunchy. I love crunchy peanut butter as well, right? But I just happen to have creamy this time. Getting that little, I just got a weird dinging sound. Getting that one little crunchy bit in that creamy peanut butter was so special. It excited me because it was rare, but also it's just like, man, it's like, oh, this sensation of crunchy becomes so much more accentuated when it's just this one little bit, which is kind of counterintuitive. You'd think you'd want a lot of crunchy bits to fully appreciate the sensation of crunchy. And so that analogy to me is like, if you're playing a piece of music, you need something, you know, sometimes you want this kind of really kind of thin sort of just continuous sort of sound. Sometimes that's really nice, but if you can get one little piece of crunchy peanut in that peanut butter, it can make it it can make the creaminess of it so much more special, if that makes sense. Absolutely. So yeah, I love the food analogies. That's great. They're better than like, well, pretty much any other analogy. Maybe it's because I typically teach on an empty stomach. I don't know if that's what it is, but
don't grocery shop on an empty stomach. It's a big no-no.
I love doing that though. Yeah. We got one subscriber, Savannah Whitwam. Hi, Savannah. Long time no talk.
Thank you.
Great. I miss you, Savannah.
Yeah. So, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to play for you.
Yeah, dude.
It's always good.
Yeah, that was great. Maybe one day I'll play on this thing. Maybe not.
Yeah, you should.
So, when is your Brahms recording released? I shouldn't call it a Brahms recording, should I? When is your recording project released?
So the project is called New Music with Brahms Guitar Volume 1. That's
great.
What
Volume
the
1.
working title is.
To be continued.
Exactly. That'll give me some more incentives to get some more grant money.
Yeah.
But it should be released by the end of this month. I'm hoping. I finished all the tracking on Friday, and it's in the mastering and mixing process now. I'm a little bit nervous, to be completely honest, but that's good. That proves that I'm not a lizard person, I think. So I'm really excited, and I'm really, really grateful to all the composers. If you don't mind, I would like to just list them.
Shout them out, dude. Go for it.
They're amazing. Max Vinetz, Amy Brandon, Anne Warren, Sam Wu, Anna Paula Antillans Alocer. Who else do we got? We got JP. Jasper. Do you remember Jasper?
Jasper? Yeah, boy.
He wrote for me. His piece isn't going to be on this record, but it will appear on the next one. Jinhee Han. All these people, I'm so grateful to you. Thank you. Amy started a 21st Century Guitar Conference, and she had me premiere her piece there, which was amazing. I don't deserve that, so thank you.
You've worked with Amy outside of this project, right?
I actually haven't. This is my first way of working with her, but she like really has opened a lot of doors for me.
Okay.
So,
on your YouTube channel, you have a piece by her called Prometheus. Is that going to be on the album?
Yeah.
Great.
So I ended up re-recording that, adding a lot more spice to that.
Okay.
It's gonna sound really cool.
I listened to that yesterday, and I was blown away, man. It is incredible. Both the composition and your playing. Yeah.
Thank you. She used like an entire retuning of the instrument, which is
really, to
my knowledge, the first time that's ever been used. And she like evoked this gigantic sound out of it. So.
Well, that's going to be great to have two versions of that thing. I really am looking forward to kind of comparing, because you uploaded the first one, I think 7 or so months ago, I think. So I assume you've had at least 7 months since then to continue living with it and getting to know it and kind of maybe change your approach to it maybe in some ways. So I'm really looking forward to kind of comparing those two recordings. That's going to be a lot of fun. Can you talk a little bit about you mentioned that Amy had started a 21st Century Guitar Festival. You've done something similar, right? You've started a collective of musicians, I think based in Tokyo is what you said, right? Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So I started an artist collective with a conductor named Ryo Hasagawa. Our collective is called Murita, and our sole purpose in creating the collective was to bring empathy to the arts, to allow people to see what the life of a working musician, working artist, working dancer might be like. And we want to bring the arts to the public in Japan because we feel like there's really a lack of care and love for expression right now, and it's essential right now.
Yeah, 100%. So how did this come about in Japan, of all places?
So Rio is Japanese, and he's from Tokyo, and I had gone on tour in Japan in 2017 across the entire country through the railways. I actually have an interesting story about that, where I almost got arrested because I had a foreigner rail pass, and I was coming back to Tokyo from Hiroshima, which is like all the way in the south. And my pass expired while I was on the train. And when I got to the station, they threatened to arrest me, but I worked it out. All I had to do was just pay a fee. But they thought that I was trying to like swindle them or something. So that was really terrifying. But,
oh man. And I assume you had your guitar with you as well. Were they going to arrest the guitar?
I had, like, a case, a guitar, my resonance box. it was real scary. But besides that, I loved Japan. It'd be amazing to live there one day. And through this collective, we've recruited 20 Japanese artists already, and we're also recruiting international artists to share artwork and collaboration online, because right now it's a little bit challenging to share in person. But ultimately, we're working towards having a festival, and our first festival for Murita, our inaugural festival, is going to be in October of 2021.
Awesome.
So
beautiful.
It's going to be amazing. It's going to be like expo style, where people can come up and like learn about your craft and ask you questions. And then at night, we're going to have performances and exhibitions.
And this is a music focused collective, right?
It's actually mixed media. So we have artists from all walks of life. Like we have a street photographer named Ulysses Aoki, who's based in Tokyo, all the way to my friend Jackie, who's like an illustrator, so and musicians in between. So we have like everything going on.
I'm gonna get you after this is done. I'm gonna get you in touch with my brother, because he's both a musician and a visual artist, and he's fantastic at both. I'm actually gonna interview him on Saturday. He's incredible, dude. I wish that I had something. I just moved, so most of my stuff's still in boxes because I've been lazy and haven't been unpacking it. I wish I could pull some of it out right now to show you. His work is incredible, and he just released an album as well, an EP of 3 songs. So yeah, I'll get you in touch with him. He'd definitely be a good person to add to that conglomerate, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, what's
collective. Sorry, spelling on the word. His name is Bobby Engel.
Bobby Engel, shout out Bobby Engel.
Shout out to Bobby Engel.
Check out his new LP.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, man. Like part of what I'm trying to do with this, especially on the musical side, is get artists to share works in progress, because I've transitioned to essentially being a recording artist over the past year. I have like record deals and stuff like that. I'm really fortunate for that, but it's also kind of skewed my view on recording, and I think it's essential for us, like all musicians and artists alike, to show people what the true art that we're making is actually like, not the modified and electronic version of what we're doing, the digital version. Like there's like a human quality to what we're doing too. It's not just the finished product.
I was really surprised at the number of videos that you have up that are labeled work in progress.
Yeah, there's gonna be tons more.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
I think I mean, as a musician, I'm super interested in the process of practicing, because that's obviously figuring out that whole process is the sort of road to being better, right? And if there's an unlimited number of ways to practice, then it makes sense that there is a limited set of ways that are, sufficiently efficient. And then there's a limited set of those that are really efficient, a limited set of those that are hyper efficient. I would rather spend 2 hours a day if I could get the same work done in 5. Does that make sense? So if I could compress 5. I just saying, I'm going to rephrase what I said because I said it really, really badly. I would, it's like trying to figure out a way of condensing 5 hours of practice into 2 is sort of kind of every musician's goal, to become more efficient, to become quicker at learning, and to improve faster and faster. But non-musicians tend not to really get into that process. And I think it may be a mistake to assume as a musician that non-musicians aren't interested in that. I think they actually are. I told you the other day about I was streaming on Reddit, and at some point I had a couple of I was just dicking around with an etude book. I wasn't performing. I was stopping and just repeating stuff and fixing stuff. And I had thousands of people watching. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn. It's not because I'm great. It's just people were interested. They were asking questions. Hey, what are you playing? Why are you doing this? Why are you repeating this thing so much? And it kind of opened my eyes to the fact that, I think actually a lot of people are really interested in the process of creativity, not just the people who are engaged in that process.
So let me ask you this, Joe. Who are you making music for? When you're putting in those hours, condensing the 5-hour block into the 2-hour block, who is that for? Is that for yourself, or is that for an expectation of yourself? Or is that for an audience?
Well, sometimes, it's kind of all three. I mean, in the immediate, if I don't practice for a few days, I feel really, really shitty, frankly. Because I feel like I'm wasting my time. I feel like I'm losing. It's not like you just get your abilities just get put on hold when you stop practicing. There is some regression.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm losing ground. Like I wasted, if I don't practice for a week, I wasted a week worth of practice because I'm going to slide back a week. It may not be entirely true. I am also thinking about an expectation of myself, future Joe, because if future Joe wants to get good jobs and if future Joe wants to play at a really high level, present Joe has to prepare him for that. Future Joe can't do that on his own, right? Yeah. But I am also thinking about other people because I do want to perform, and it's different right now a little bit with the whole pandemic. But if I know that I have a recording session coming up, or if I have a show coming up, I am practicing for the audience in some way, because I want them to feel like I don't want them to walk away being like, dude, this fucking cellist sucks. Why did I spend my money on this? I want them to feel like they got their money's worth. But I also kind of want, I'm not above admitting I'm a little bit of an attention whore. I want to just sort of milk as much applause out of them as I can. And it makes sense that the better you play, the more applause you get. So it's a little bit of all three, I think. What about you?
I think that there's also a way you can frame the way you practice. For example, if you had a new piece, if I wrote a piece for you today, and I said, you have to play this for me by Friday, you're going to practice it way differently than if you knew that you had 6 months to prepare it, right?
That's true, yeah.
In fact, you may even be able to get it where it would be at in 6 months. You just have the pressure of doing it. Mm-hmm. So, I think
makes sense.
The same way that you can frame your mind to get yourself to floss your teeth every day, because I think that's a really great analogy for everything. If you can get yourself to floss your teeth every day, you can get yourself to do anything every day, basically. Mm-hmm. You can say, oh, running every morning is flossing. I have to do it, or else my legs are going to be in terrible shape and I'm going to get a belly. In the same way, if I stop flossing, my gums are going to get all fucked up and I'm going to get plaque all over my teeth and I'm going to have bad breath or something, and then I'm not going to want to go out and I'm not going to date or something like that. You can chain it that way.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you can make a practice of performing and turn that into a video, and you say, I have to upload this no matter what, even if it's not to my standard, I have to do it. Then you're going to push your standard higher, and every
Mm-hmm.
time you do it, it's going to be better. That's
Yeah.
my philosophy behind doing the work in progress things. It's just like, wait, if I can get into the process of turning playing music into flossing, then it's nothing. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to think about it anymore. It's just part of what I do. So that's my philosophy behind it. I know
I
it
like
sounds
that.
kind of batshit crazy, but it's just like adding a frame to playing music.
You've got to be a little batshit crazy, I think, to even attempt to take music seriously. I think you have to be a little fucked up, okay? At least a little bit, all right?
Yeah.
I like that. I think that yeah, I think often it's easy enough to kind of relegate the process of being a musician to it's this extra thing that I do or it's work. But maybe you're right. Maybe reframing it as, you know, it's not as work, but as on the same level of flossing your teeth, making your bed. Just you have to do this to have some semblance of a life that's a little bit put together, right?
Yeah.
That this is on the same level.
Like mindfulness. Yeah.
So there about 2 years ago, I didn't finish it. I got to day 55, but I did the 100 days of practice challenge. And the idea, I think if you know that challenge, it was this Instagram thing. The idea is that
Hillary Hahn started it.
Did Hillary Hahn start it? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so the idea for the 3 people watching who may not know what that is, the idea is that you practice every day for 100 days, and every day you post a 1-minute snippet of what you're practicing, how you're practicing it, something like that, you know, and it was super motivating because I ended up getting a lot of my friends who were texting, non-musician friends who were texting me and being like, dude, I'm watching your videos every day. Keep it up. And then I wake up that...
Don't post it. They'll be like, dude, where's the video?
Exactly. That happened. I took 3 days off. Because I was just killing myself. All right. Took 3 days off. And I had people being like, dude, you okay? Where's the video? What, aren't you doing the 100 days? And then I had to tell them, well, I'm taking 3 days off. But even though that's not really part of the challenge, you know, and it surprised me how many people were interested in seeing something that was, you know, in some cases really badly out of tune, didn't have the sort of like finesse that maybe I wanted, the polish I wanted, the sort of expression that I wanted. And, you know, there's some of those videos I go back and I listen to, I'm like, hey, that's not bad. A lot of them I go back and listen to, I'm just like, this doesn't look good. This is really bad. Yeah. But then, you know, thinking about it is like, well, this is a small snapshot of the overall progress. You know, it makes sense that at some point you start at 0% and then eventually you make your way close to 100%. I don't know if you ever get there, but it makes, you know, at some point you're going to be at 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%. What's wrong with showing that? What's wrong with showing, hey, you don't, yeah, exactly. Like, you don't have to have this high level of polish to at least be a little bit proud of what you're doing. And it really did change the way I felt about making mistakes when I performed. I got so much more comfortable with like, I made a mistake, I'll move on, you know.
Exactly. That you hit the nail on the head. And the other thing is, it kind of reframes your mind about apologizing for your work. I think that's another thing that a lot of artists have a fallacy towards. Like, they don't realize that if you have confidence, your confidence outweighs that apology. It's as simple as that. Mm-hmm. If you present yourself like, I'm doing something and I believe in it, then you don't need to apologize if you make a mistake, because no one will notice. They'll just notice that you look like bold and confident and you're killing it. That's what we need to learn how to channel all the time if we can. And there is another thing that really struck a chord with me when I went on my first solo tour. Was I had just seen Itzhak Perlman perform, and to anybody that doesn't know who that is, he's one of the most prominent violinists of the 20th century. He still is a pedagogue for a lot of the leading violinists in the world right now. But I found out that he doesn't practice at all. His only practice comes from performing. And I thought that was such an interesting thing that when I went on tour when I finally got my own tour where I had a program and I was just churning the program every single day, I realized I didn't need to practice anymore. The only thing I needed to practice was my stage my stage choreography.
Mm.
Like the music ultimately ended up just being like a part of what I was doing every day.
Wow. Wow.
It was the flossing, it was the running, it was the meditation and yoga or whatever it was.
Huh.
It didn't need me to think about it anymore. Just like, oh, I'm in a new setting. How do I adjust my sound for this setting? That's what I have to think about.
Mm.
So,
Wow. That's really, really fascinating.
yeah,
Because I would think that when you're on tour like that, especially it was a solo tour, I assume.
yeah,
Yeah, that I mean, I would just be, losing my fucking mind every day, being like, oh, I gotta practice, So it's really interesting to hear that kind of the opposite thing happened. That you went in that direction of just practicing when you're on stage. Wow, that's interesting.
yeah.
Huh.
It was really weird too. Like I felt like I was getting more out of like going for a walk and like seeing my environment.
Hmm.
And I would go back and like think about music for 10 minutes or something, and then I felt like way better when I got on stage rather than like sitting in a room in a city where I don't know anyone or anything, the culture, I don't know the language or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And like having to go out on stage and experience anxiety and fear and all these things, like those things are inevitable.
Yeah.
But if you
Yeah.
make yourself comfortable otherwise, I think you'll feel good. And like practicing kind of takes on a lot of different levels. It's not always just like the mechanical side of practicing. It's also the presentation side
Right.
and maybe you want to change it up a little bit. Maybe you want to like make your music swing one night and you've never done that. Like how do you prepare yourself to do that?
Mm.
Like that comes from like mental fortitude. It doesn't technical. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I'm gonna have to organize myself a solo tour one day. Figure this shit out. You're on some stuff I'm not on. That's cool, man. So man, it's like 1:30. This is great. We've been like an hour and a half in.
doesn't feel like
It doesn't feel like it. No, this is great. Let's kind of touch on. Oh my God, I'm losing my memory. Let's kind of touch on the you, as I said earlier, your sort of your repertoire spans roughly 300 years or so, maybe 250. You're playing Bach, but you're also playing living contemporary composers who are have a ton more output to contribute.
And they send me memes on where we talk about stocks and falling in love and all those things. Like they're
Wonderful.
real. They're not just like statues or something.
Yeah, and it's really easy to elevate like Bach to he's this porcelain bust somewhere, and it's like, Bach almost murdered a bassoonist one time because bassoonist insulted Bach, so he challenged him to a duel.
And Bach's children wrapped his music, or they used his music for fish wrapping paper. I don't know if you knew that.
But I did not know that. Lunatics, I tell you. But Bach also, he started off as an organ repair person. That's really what he did once he got out of his apprenticeship. He knew how to compose, but he was mostly fixing and adjusting organs. And of course, doing that means you have to be able to play them. And he was at this chapel, and the Duke of the chapel, was showing visitors around, and they happened to be there while Bach was playing. And the Duke was like, he fired the existing organist on the spot and told Bach, I want to hire you. And Bach said, I don't want to be a church organist. The Duke literally wrote a decree that said Bach was going to be the organist or he was going to jail. So Bach was like, well, I guess I'm a fucking organist, I guess. And then it was only, I think, a few months into that job that Buxtehude was playing in a town nearby. But of course, Bach being poor, he was walking everywhere, so he got permission to leave for like a couple of weeks so he could walk, visit Buxtehude, watch him play, stay at the town a little bit, and come back. And he ended up liking the town so much that he was gone for 3 months. But he was so good when he came back, he just got his job back. They were like, well, we can't afford not to have you. This is not some god of music. This is just a guy, who also happens to be arguably, I think, one of the most genius composers to ever live. So how does this is kind of so how how do you deal with this whole reworking of music, this kind of transcription of music, when you don't have the composer where you could just call them up and say, hey, I'm kind of thinking this thing might work. What do you think? And you can kind of collaborate with them. How do you do that with the music of a composer you can't talk to?
Yeah, that's a very perplexing question, I have to say, Joe. But what the first thing you can
I
do
don't know
is
if that's good or bad.
it's perplexing because ultimately it's up to you. You have to do a service to them. They're not alive anymore, so you can either honor them or you can discredit them and say that they had a good idea but a bad execution, or great execution but not the best idea. Um, but ultimately, the thing that you can do is understand their form, first and foremost, because form says a lot about what the music it was intending to do.
Mm.
From there, you have to know your instrument's limitations. If you can't stretch, or your body's limitations on your instrument too. If you can't make something happen just because you are not physically able, that's okay, but you can adapt.
Mm.
So let's say I'm playing a Bach cello suite, and there's a stretch that I have to deal with, where the range is too low and the range is too high at the same time. I don't think that would really happen on my instrument, but it might happen on yours.
Yeah.
Something you could do is just transpose the line up an octave or something,
Mm.
and then it might work a lot more cleanly. It might feel or mechanically for you.
Mm.
Um, but I think in working with dead composers, really what you need to understand is like what was going on in their surroundings at the time. Like if someone looks back on 2020 in 100 years, they're gonna be like, oh wow, people are wearing masks. Like maybe I should asphyxiate my breathing a little bit, and maybe that'll get me a better understanding of my transcription. I'm just kidding, of course. You should wear a mask, but uh, you know, understanding the history of where those people were at, just like what you were just saying. Like Bach was just like a dude who played organ. Like knowing that about him, he probably wouldn't have been so anal about you flourishing on his music or something. That was just what was going on at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it may add to the depth. And he may have done that himself and he just didn't write it down. I mean, sure, it's obvious because they were publishing multiple editions of their music with different flourishes and interpretations and dynamics and everything.
Yeah, and in the specific case of Bach, we obviously we are, when you have historically informed performance, it's an educated guess because we don't have recordings from the time.
Yeah.
There may be some direct line from a modern performer to someone who was performing at that time. There may be a direct pedigree there through teachers and stuff, but it's still a giant game of telephone. And but that being said, one of the things that we do know is that Baroque music was highly ornamented. That's why we call it Baroque music. It's in the name. It's highly ornamented. There's this concept to take something simple and add filigree, and then filigree to filigree, and then filigree to filigree to the filigree, and just to create this kind of really complicated sense of time and pitch. We know that a lot of that was left up to the performer. If you look at the manuscripts of like the Bach cello suites and the partitas and sonatas for violin, you don't have a lot of markings.
No.
I mean, there's almost nothing. At best, he'll put a mezzo forte at the beginning, which just says, play this loud enough to hear. That's really what mezzo forte is. Don't play this quietly, but don't play it super loudly. Barely any bowings, and when there are bowings, they're honestly unworkable. The bowings for the first for the prelude for the first cello suite, basically no one does them because they're unworkable. It doesn't make any sense. And so again in the specific case of Bach, you're talking about someone who was writing music with the cultural expectation that the artist would add or maybe even subtract things in order to create new harmonic ideas, new textural ideas, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think another thing that you can do is, if you have confidence in your own artistry, you can emulate performers of the past too. So we do have access to people playing the music of Bach, ranging from Rachel Barton Pine to Glenn Gould to I don't know. There's millions of at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, you know your musical taste best. If you feel like you enjoy a certain interpretation, you feel like that's the way that you want to play it, just do it. Like,
Mm.
who's saying you can't do it?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I heard an amateur play Bach the other day, who changed the speed of the repeat. He like
Ooh.
brought it to halftime during the repeat, and
Ooh.
it sounded awesome.
Yeah.
I would never do that, but it sounded amazing.
Yeah.
I think that's like so interesting. That just goes to show that like they were hearing the music that way. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
play music the way you hear it.
Yeah.
And if you feel like there's a limitation in the music, just change it.
Joseph, let's take a brief intermission, and I really want to continue this idea of maybe some extreme changes to music. So I'm just gonna mute everyone, and we'll be right back. All right. So you were talking about a performer who made a decision, which is actually pretty common, which is on the repeat do something slightly different, but the difference was pretty extreme, right? Just cutting the tempo in half.
Yeah.
I think he's dead. There was a cellist, was a cellist named Yehuda Hanani, which is a really fun name to say. Not to be confused with Yehuda Menuhin, who is the violinist, but Yehuda Hanani, he's a Jewish cellist. And this is a great case of Spotify being a terrible, terrible source. All 6 of his cello suites are on Spotify. Or sorry, I should say all 6 of his recordings of the Bach suites are on Spotify. They are pretty much to the track mislabeled, so you will have to dig through to find the movement that you want because it's not named the right thing.
I hate when that happens.
It's terrible. It's terrible. His suites are known for having these really, really wild, extreme, very non-Baroque approaches to repetitions. So as an example, in the first cello suite in the G major minuets, the first minuet, whenever he does a repeat, he plays a pizzicato. And turns that opening G, D, B into a strummed chord, which is not how it's written. It's not written that way. It's arpeggiated. In the second minuet on the repeats, he plays Ponticello, which is extreme to the bridge, really light touch. You get this creepy, scratchy, horror music sounding thing. And it's really, really not typical to do that. And he was known for doing it. And I think there's some of the more compelling recordings of the suites because it's so unexpected what he does. when you listen to another performer, it's like,
Yeah, they're interesting. They're fresh. It's
yeah,
like refreshing to hear musicians just take a chance like that.
it's really predictable when an artist goes, okay, I'm gonna play the second repeat loud, or I'm gonna play the second one piano instead of forte. Okay, cool, great. I could have seen that. I could have seen that coming. That's the decision.
Say, I could have done that. I like it when I hear something and I'm like, whoa, I don't know if I could have done that.
Right, yeah. Or I would never have thought of doing that. Or if I had, I would have immediately dismissed it as, no, I can't do that. And here's a guy who laid these down in stone. It's set. It's a recording. It's set. It's never going away. Until the mainframe gets nuked by whatever AI we decide to evolve. But that's a different combo.
You have to be careful of your Roomba vacuum. It might kill you. You might take the magnet on your cello and rip it out or something. But yeah, like I think that's another thing with recording. Recording is ultimately just a relic of that moment and that time. That's something I really stand behind. And if you can kind of accept that, come to acceptance with like, this is what I sound like right now. It changes the landscape of making a recording. It no longer feels like this is the end all be all. This is just like, this is me at 25 playing Bach.
Right, yeah. Or like, this is the thing. This is me as a musician, period, done for. This is distilled. Yeah, and it's not that way at all.
Yeah. And I think that we're more privileged than we've ever been in any time in history, because anybody can record themselves now, even with just their phone. And the recording quality is decent. It's probably better than like the shit they were using 100 years ago when they just had like fundamental recording equipment. Like
it's absolutely better.
Basics. Yeah. So, I mean, why not encourage that? Why not get people behind that? Like, put yourself out there, give it a shot, see what happens.
One of the things that I've been doing with my students for the past couple of years is not only encouraging them to get in touch with me between lessons if they have questions, or to talk to me, which no one does, even though I know they have questions and whatever. I'm just like, dude, call me. Just call me. I'll work with you. If I'm busy, I'm busy. I'll call you later. But I'll talk with you for an hour if you want. That's actually not true. I did have an adult student who would text me all the time, and I loved it. He would be like, I'm not bothering you. And I'm like, dude, no, I'm just so happy you're practicing. Are you kidding me? But I encourage my students to record themselves and send it to me, because I can't tell you, especially young kids, how many students get discouraged by the fact that they know they can play it better by themselves, and then they come in the lesson and it's like 80%, if not less than that, and they get really discouraged. But I'm aware of that, and so I'm always looking at things being like, I bet this is a mistake you don't make when you're by yourself, and I have no way of knowing. It's just a guess, but I have a student who routinely does send me videos, and every other week or something like that, and I'm just like, yeah, dude, this is great, because you're gonna have this in a year. You're gonna be able to go back and look at this, this prelude that you're playing, and it's okay, But after a year, you're gonna be able to go back and look at that and go, oh my God, compared to now, look where I've come, and that is gonna be so fucking motivating for you. And
yeah, or you may look back and say, wow, I had a really good idea of this a year ago. And
yeah,
let me revisit that. Let me see what it feels like now. Is it still like as compelling to me? Is it still moving? Do other people respond to it? Like, I would love to hear like the same cellist play the same piece for the course of their life and see what it evolves into. Like, you may get something like Picasso, like where at the first start of his career, he's like making really formal drawings and figure nudes and all this stuff, and then in the middle of his career, he has the blue period, right, where there's like a really clear aesthetic to what he's doing, and at the end of his life, it's just abstract. Like, I would love that. I want to hear that. I mean, you can see that in Glenn Gould, like with his recordings of the Goldberg variations, from the time that he's 21 or whatever to the last one, the year before his death. There's oh my God, it's so different. It doesn't even sound like the same person.
Exactly. Yeah, I was gonna say it almost sounds like it's two different pianists.
Yeah.
If it weren't for the humming in the background, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, that's what makes music so lovely, though, too, because I'm sure just as many people can say, oh yeah, I love that one, compared to the more recent one, and vice versa. Like, music connects us in that way. Like, it makes us feel. So
Yeah, we actually have a great example of a cellist doing what you're talking about, which is Yo-Yo Ma and his six suites. He released the first six in 1983, I think.
mhm.
Is that right? I pulled it up. 1983, and he released them again in 2018. 25
Wow.
years. No, is that right? 35 years later.
I want to see Jay-Z do that. I'm serious.
No, yeah, no, I'm right. I'm right there with you. I'm right there with
Like,
you.
still have that like that ego and that swag that he had when he was a kid. Like
Mm, mm.
I'm sure Yo-Yo Ma had the same type of energy. Like he was probably like, I'm the shit. I'm like a Harvard Harvard cellist. I'm like on the forefront of cello playing, and now he's like, I'm an old wise
Mhm.
man.
Mhm.
I've experienced it all.
Yeah. Let me look
So
this up. So he let me find his wiki. So he was born in 1955. So when he recorded those suites, he would have been, what is that?
swag that he,
28? Is that right? 28?
yeah.
And then 2018 would have been 63?
Whoa.
Am I doing that math right? Yeah,
I don't
63.
know. My brain is it's not in math mode.
Okay, if that's right, 68 and then again at 23, or sorry, 28 and then again at 63. I'm 28 right now, right? And
Quit.
I'm not even close to Yo-Yo Ma. No, I mean, hey,
Well,
at some point,
dude,
I'm actually working on the sixth suite, which is ungodly difficult because that was written for a different instrument actually. Um, yeah, oh yeah. That first dude, that's my favorite prelude, I think.
so good.
I think actually I think the D major suite might be my favorite, just overall. So I don't know if you know this. It was actually written for a different instrument,
It was for the viola da spalla, right?
violoncello piccolo, actually, which
Oh,
is
I didn't know that.
sounds like it's the same instrument, but it's smaller, and it has five strings, which is why if you watch cellists playing any of the other five suites, you know, it all stays pretty much in like first to fourth position. If you watch people playing the sixth suite, it goes a lot. It deals in a lot higher positions and stays in higher positions for a lot longer and requires some pretty wacky technical stuff. Use of the thumb, which really wasn't a thing. I mean, it was a thing, but it wasn't really as common as it is now at that time. I've always wanted to get my hands on a five-string cello.
That'd be cool.
So speaking of the suites and kind of tying into this whole conversation about transcribing things, we don't have to talk about this much because it's a dream, but I've always wanted to do recordings of, or at least performances of the suites on either a mandocello or a tenor banjo because they are both tuned like a cello in fifth with four strings, of course the mandolin being double strung, but an octave higher. And there's some really interesting things, and I'm sure you've encountered this, you know, with the sonatas and partitas and the suites. There's a lot of chordal stuff for 4-note chords and 3-note chords. On a violin and a cello, you have to roll them. You have to play the bottom two and then the top two, because you can get those 3 notes to speak, but you have to really crush the strings, and it's never going to be appropriate. I don't think. But on a mandolin and on a guitar, you can play all of those at once by strumming.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested in getting my hands on some of those things. And I really want to explore this world that you're in of considering the music as it's written for the original instrument, but then also trying to figure out how you can get that idea on something else, something that is mechanically a completely different species of sonic tool. Because it sounds like such a fascinating process, and
It is. It's like switching controllers in a video game or something. Like you played like The Legend of Zelda on the N64 controller, and then you played it on an Xbox controller. It would essentially be the same game, but your skill expression would be different, right?
yeah.
It's kind of the same type of thing. So, like,
Skill expression. Yeah, that's good. I like that. No, I like that. I hadn't thought of that.
yeah.
That's a good phrase.
So in terms of chords, that's like one of the coolest things though. Like you have so many options on a pluck string instrument, especially if you're using your hand to pluck instead of a plectrum, because a plectrum is still kind of limited in that same sense that the bow is limited. But it also has advantages, like you can play faster with a plectrum. But what you can do is, like I've seen performers like Julian Lodge and Bella Flack, like some of these dudes who play Bach on their bluegrass or jazz instruments, they'll like they'll just decide. They'll make it a conscious decision. This is the way that I'm treating chords.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get these really amazing like pillars of texture. It's almost like acting like an architect or something with the music instead of acting like a musician. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm gonna build these buildings this way, and then it'll change the way I walk through the building.
There's in the C major Bach suite, the second half of the Sarabande starts with this kind of dominant G dominant G chord, and then it kind of gets into a bit of a diminished chord with a G sharp diminished chord. And what's interesting is instead of it, so there's 3-note chords that happen on beat 1 and 2. Then you have a 16th note run on beat 3. Next measure, chords on beat 1 and 2. 16th note run on beat 3. What's interesting about these chords is instead of the typical, I have my melody here and I'm going to add my chords under here, the melody is actually in the middle of the chord, and the outer notes are the harmony. And it does lead to this. I can imagine if you are a guitarist of a certain level of skill, you can pluck those 3 notes at the same time and have the middle one be louder. I assume that that's a thing you can do, right? Okay. But with the cello, you get this opportunity to accent the middle note with the low note and the middle note with the high note, not at the same time. And again, you could do that on a guitar by rolling the chord, but it really adds this different kind of approach to texture. But if you just played those chords with that upper note, you just get a bunch of B's in a row, and that's not fun.
Well, sometimes what's interesting too, Joe, is that our ears can speak a lot more than we give them credit for. Like, I actually find it a little bit displeasing when I hear guitarists over accentuate that type of melody thing. Like, they'll be playing a fugue and they like really try and like push the subject's note with that one finger that they can get it to sing with. But in actuality, your ear will fill it in. Your ear knows what it sounds like already. So like sometimes just like playing it as it is and not putting any emphasis on it is also valid. Like, that's a conscious choice you can make too.
Yeah. You know what I just realized? The three people watching are you, me, and me.
Wait, I don't have it open though.
Oh, you don't? Okay, then there's at least one person watching, because now it says 2 watching, so maybe it's just me and me. It's on I have it because I had it up on my phone and I have it up on my laptop. So whatever.
That's okay. I mean, I think we're having good conversation.
Yeah.
Even if we don't have an audience right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Someone may revisit this when you're at like podcast number 1,000 and be like, "Whoa, they were getting some deep shit, man."
No, that would be really awesome. That'd be really awesome. Man, music is so cool.
I want to talk some controversial topics.
Let's do it.
Hit me with the controversy. Hit me with the hot takes.
Okay. Bigfoot, real? No? What?
Definitely not real. People take mushrooms in the forest and seeing things. Definitely real.
Okay. This is not controversial, Joseph. You're towing the line. All right. This is what they want you to think. Okay. Okay. Birds, real? Not real?
Birds are real, and they're actually contemporary dinosaurs. And you know what? You were talking about emulating nature. Birds can teach us to emulate nature because a lot of them can repeat speech patterns and stuff. They're actually very brilliant creatures.
I think it's pretty clear that the birds work for the bourgeoisie. So
They're actually Soviet spies.
Beginning in 1959 and continuing until about 2001, the government began slowly eradicating all of the birds in North America and eventually the entire world, replacing them with high-tech surveillance drones.
Dude, and then you know what happened in 2001? There was a really big plane that crashed, and that was a type of bird.
No, yeah, well, in the sense that it was a machine that was flying. Yes. Well, let me put it to you like this: pigeons. Clearly, they're one of the more insidious surveillance tactics the government has. Yes. Have you ever seen a baby pigeon?
I haven't.
No, you have not. You know why? Because they're not fucking real. That's why.
You ever seen what an owl looks like without any feathers?
The feathers are made. There's more there's more interference, I think, at night in the atmosphere. So the feathers are extra transmitting devices. This is why. Listen, I touch a power line, I get electrocuted. A bird touches a power line, nothing happens. Why? They're recharging. That's why. The pandemic, it's all a cover. They're changing the batteries in the birds. Okay, open your eyes. The documents are out there.
They're charging their crystals in the sun. Do owls without, if you like see a skinned owl, that's kind of gross, but if you ever Google it, it kind of looks like a raptor.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
I've seen ones where they lift the bird up, and the owls have really, really long legs. They're all up in the fur, or not the fur, in the feathers. I mean transmission antennas devices. Yeah.
All right, let me hit you with some hot topics here.
Give me one. Get me.
Neuralink. When Neuralink comes out, are you gonna get one?
I mean, okay, on the one hand, I want to be super smart and I want to be able to read people's minds. On the other hand,
and you could probably memorize music in like 2 minutes with it.
Well, that's actually the other hand for me. The other hand is I think that there's something rewarding about working hard at something like music, and I think if you could just download the skill or the knowledge into your brain, I don't think it would be as valuable. You know, what's the point?
What if the meta becomes like every working musician has one? Then what do? Do you have to get it, or do you just stay on the fringe and like struggle?
Oh man, well, but here's the thing though, so it makes sense then that there would be no such thing as a working musician, because if you can get everybody to the same level of musical ability on, let's say, every instrument, and they have the text of every work downloaded into their brain, then what's the thing that, because the thing that differentiates one musician from another is not only skill but also their ability to express in a certain way. Child prodigies. One of the reasons I find them not to be compelling at all is, okay, it's crazy that there's some freak child out there that can nail every note of the Tchaikovsky violin concerto, but I've yet to listen to a child prodigy who I think displays a high level of musical expression. That's why I don't think they're really worth our time and our energies. They don't have the experience. They don't have just a physical brain structure, I think, to really process emotions on a deep level. So that's really what differentiates good musicians from less good musicians, is their ability. Again, it's a skill thing, but it's also ability to express on a certain level. But if you could just download that into everyone's brain, then there's no difference between me and Kanye, because technically I could just turn on the Kanye setting and I'll sound like Kanye, I'll dance like Kanye, with enough makeup I could look like Kanye.
I would be wait, I'm gonna interrupt you, but
okay.
I would be careful with that thought process, because I'm sure people said the same thing. Like when people started to learn how to read, they were probably like, oh, those motherfuckers think that they're smarter than us, they can read. I could learn all those things from going out and experiencing the world. I don't need to read anything. And
okay.
Then,
okay.
And then they're gaining knowledge that maybe they didn't even know was possible.
That's fair enough.
But
and I guess
I think that, like, if you look at like contemporary child prodigies, probably the most prominent one is Jacob Collier.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Jacob Collier is touching on a lot of music and concepts and audiences that maybe would never be drawn together. Like he's collaborating with like Ty Dolla $ign, and then like collaborating with classical musicians.
Mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm.
that's a pretty rare thing.
That's true. But at this point though, Jacob Collier's moved out of being a child prodigy because he's not a child anymore.
That's true. So you're saying like a real child, not just like a young person.
Like, yeah, exactly. So like, I think if you're 16, 17, 18, I think you're probably at a point where you could be engaging in a relatively deep level of musical expression. I don't know that a 6-year-old can do that.
Yeah. I agree.
And so that's really what I'm talking about, is like 6-year-olds that go and just absolutely nail the Tchaikovsky violin concerto on like a quarter-size violin. Okay, that's awesome.
That's like blood sport. It's like technical. It's technocratics. It's not. It has nothing to do with music.
Yeah, and
an entire discussion in its own. Like
yeah, and I don't
fine with that.
I don't care about technicality if it doesn't serve music in any way. It's great that little girl can go on there and she can play the dynamics and she can play the articulations and she's got the bowings down and the fingerings down. There's not a single note out of tune or out of time. Great. A computer can do that, and I have zero interest in listening to a computer make music.
Yeah,
What I am interested in is a human using a computer to make music. That's a different story.
yeah. I mean, I think like we should recognize children that have an affinity for sure.
100%. 100%.
But we have to set them up so that way they don't crash and burn. Like, I don't know if you know anybody who was formerly a child prodigy, but I know a few, and they hate themselves.
Interesting.
Truly, they feel like they never were able to like experiment or move out of the thing that they became at such a young age. Like as you said, like they weren't really developed.
Are these people that currently have careers?
Yeah, I know a prominent one that has a career and management from one of the biggest management firms, but does not practice and does not enjoy themselves. So
Wow.
It's sad. I mean, we have to figure out a better way to deal with them because they are people after all.
100%.
And, like we need to figure out a way to help to like develop them in a healthy way, not just to send them off and like tell them that they're already at the forefront of music making.
I agree 100%, and I think it's a bit of I think it's you used the word blood sport earlier, and I think I would use a word more. I think I would be a little more clear and say I think it's exploitative. If your 6-year-old shows that much talent, what you need to do is foster it. You need to teach them to expand themselves. Once maybe they're just nailing the violin. Take it away from them and give them something else. Let them nail that until they find something maybe that's a little more difficult that actually takes some time to get. Because what you're doing then is you're actually teaching them that growth is possible. Instead of, your purpose in life is not to grow, it's not to experiment, it's not to find your own voice, it's to just repetitively play the same things in front of people because it's an oddity. It's almost like the idea of a circus freak, because it's, isn't it crazy that a 6-year-old's playing violin? I don't really care, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's really cool and it's crazy. And I'm sure there's a lot of like weird neuroscience that could explain that, there are freaks everywhere and that's awesome. It's crazy that human brains can be that way. Right. But again, I'm more interested in creativity and expression. And I just don't think a 6-year-old can do that. It's not their fault. It's just that their brains they're only 6. Their brains aren't developed,
Yeah.
They may not even have a real sense of like, they may not even have the ability to just like understand what people think of them. They may not even have that ability yet.
I don't even know that. I'm 25. I don't know what people think of me. Like I don't even know what I look like, to be honest. Like I'm still figuring that out for myself.
Right, yeah, but you still know that other people can have an opinion of you. I think my point is that the 6-year-old may not even know that fact to begin with, that other people are seeing things differently than they're seeing them.
Yeah. I mean, this is so nuanced, but let me rephrase the question then. Like,
Okay.
if you had a child that was a prodigy, what would you do? Like, let's say you had a child and you gave them an instrument, and just off the bat they read music, like they just felt like they could read music, and you couldn't explain it. They just had an affinity, and before you know it, they're copying your practicing routine. I mean, they're your child after all. They like look up to you. What do you do at that moment? Like, do you encourage them? How do you find them the support system? Because I'm sure there are people out there that have this problem. They're like, wow, my kid is like really bright. Like, I'm not just saying that because it's my kid. They're actually really, really bright, and I don't know what to do with them. Like, I don't know how to develop a healthy relationship with this.
That's a really good question, dude. God damn. I don't know. So I'm thinking out loud here because I've never really considered this. So if I was a parent, my primary concern with, like, let's say a 6-year-old would not be, let's embark them on a journey that's going to set them up for a career for the rest of their life. My concern would be, I want my child to develop their own sense of personality and identity. I want them to learn how to navigate and negotiate the world with other people. So what I would probably try to do actually is I would still encourage them to play music, and I would still play music with them, and I would make it a game. But what I would also do is I would also be putting them in stuff to find out what are they not good at, and I would encourage them to do that thing. Maybe they are just a super whiz at the violin, and I have to have zero instruction with them on technique and theory and stuff like that. Okay, great. I'm gonna make them play baseball, and if they're bad at baseball, I'm gonna encourage them to play baseball. Not gonna make them do it if it's detrimental to their health and their mental development. I'm not gonna make them do it if they don't want to, but I'm gonna encourage them to do it because they're bad at it.
Yeah, I think another way you could think of it is like, how can you explore within the world of violin a way that's like healthy? Like, maybe it means like finding the neighborhood kids that also play instruments and getting them to play together, because they may they may uplift them or something.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Or I would pretend, I would be like, you know what? Wow, you're so good at this. Will you teach me how to play violin? And I would get them to teach me how to play violin, even though I really don't play violin. I mean, I can play a couple scales and whatever, but I can't really shift on violin, and I'm not good. But let's say they could actually do that. On the one hand, maybe they actually could teach me something, But on the other hand, I'm getting them to think about what they're doing in a different way than just doing it. And I think I would encourage that and turn it into a game. Will you teach Daddy to play violin? How fun would that be? And let's just, not a lesson situation. Let's just have fun, because I'm curious to hear your experience, because I'm willing to bet it's probably the same. I've always enjoyed playing the cello, but especially when I was younger, there's a significant portion of my time when it wasn't super fun. I felt like no one taught me how to feel good about my performance. No one taught me how to feel okay about making mistakes. It was just, you made a mistake, that means you're not practicing, versus you made a mistake. Good. Let's talk about it. Let's see why it happened. Let's form a plan. Let's get a game plan. So I cultivated, or it was cultivated in me, a mindset, instead of a mindset of I am a person who sometimes fails. Instead, it was a mindset of I am a person who is a failure. And I would really love to cultivate the mindset in my kid of it's okay to mess up, and I would really want them to have that. If they ended up being a professional musician, I would love for them to never have to suffer under the mindset of I am a failure,
Yeah. Damn, that's so hard.
I don't know if that really answers your question or not. I think I might have gotten a little off topic.
I mean, I just wanted to pick your brain on it. It wasn't really a question, but like, yeah, I think it's a really, really tough subject. And personally for me, I did not enjoy playing music. In fact, I don't know if I even enjoy playing music now sometimes. For me, it's just like an eternal struggle, but it's like part of who I am. I don't think I can do anything else, so I have to do it.
I think it's also different as an adult, because we can embrace a certain level of suffering and learn how to move through it. I think we have that mindset, we have that experience, but it's not the same when you're 12. Again, going back to the whole, I don't know if your brain is just developed at that point. I don't think a 12-year-old is really in a place to say the extreme amount of suffering that I am dealing with right now, that I'm experiencing with, is actually a playground for growth. I don't think a 12-year-old can really understand that concept. So what about you? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what about you? What would you do with your kid in that situation?
Well, I don't know if I told you this, but I was forced to play music when I was like 3 years old.
Really?
And I could read music before I could read English.
Wow. I didn't know that.
It did not fare well for me, to be honest. Like, I didn't enjoy practicing or making music at all, because the only time I was having fun was when I was like playing on the piano and just like kind of improvising. Like, I never really loved playing written music as a kid. But my dad had someone in his life named Craig Sharmat, who ended up becoming the composer of Cat Dog. You ever seen
Really? Yeah.
But he used to say, like, quit Sharmatting around. Because that guy Sharmat used to, like, fuck around on his guitar when he was a kid. We grew up together. So, like, that was my experience. Which was kind of negative. But I wish I had kind of had more structure, to be honest. Like, if I had a kid, I would enroll them in chamber music like that, because I didn't have that. Like, I've always been a lone wolf with music. So I don't think I can do that now necessarily either. Like I only can really play with myself to like the ability that I want to.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think it's such a nuanced thing. Like, how do you approach? Like, if I were me, I would want them to live a life through the thing that they love, and if they love playing the instrument, like I wouldn't take that away from them.
Mm.
I think your point of like having them fail is really important, and maybe it's not necessarily healthy to fail from the instrument from the
Mm.
get-go.
Mm.
If they're really confident, because then they might drop it completely. And like I definitely suffered from that when I was a kid. Like I would just like drop playing music for 6 months and then like play
Mm.
irrationally long hours as a kid, like
Mm.
6 to 8 hours a day.
Wow.
Um, uh, so I don't think that was a healthy approach at all.
No.
Um, but um, what can you do? Like maybe you just like find a way for them to succeed, but not at the level of competitions. Like I think that should be a choice that they make for
Mm.
themselves.
Mm.
I don't think that you should force children into those situations because regardless of how clean they play or how good they are, like those set the standard that music is like something you're trying to be better than other people at, but it's never that way.
Mm.
It's more of learning how to make people feel a sense of clarity and peace and an escape even through music making. So
I guess this discussion kind of begs the question that kids can even do that in the first place, because
I don't know.
I don't know either. And you were talking about like not forcing kids to do competition. I agree that forcing kids to do things they don't want to do is likely not healthy, both for their development and for your relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I should also caveat all of this by saying not a parent, never been a parent. I've never really looked into being a parent, never studied anything. I haven't read Dr. Spock. I am pulling all this out of my butthole. But it does seem to me that there is a lesson to be learned in doing things that are difficult or things that scare you or things that you don't want to do and learning how to overcome them, because it doesn't get easier as you become an adult. In fact, it gets worse. The world.
Something to be said about having proficiency in a lot of skills.
Yeah.
And I think that's underrated.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if we had been taught when we were kids to like become 90% good at cooking or something, that would be a lot more helpful than like trying to teach your kid to be a master chef.
Yeah.
If you just set people up to be good at the fundamentals of the things that they're interested in, like
Yeah.
I don't need to be a professional painter, but I can paint as a form of leisure now or something because I have the skills to do it. Like
Yeah.
those skills are really important to have.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And so maybe the approach that would be good to take would be give them the freedom to, when they're younger, do all this exploring. Let them latch onto something that they want to continue doing, whether it's cooking or music or mountain climbing or catching frogs, I don't care. And then inside of that thing that they really love, then teach them to search for challenges and difficulties, and teach them, hey, this thing that you love is not always going to be easy. In fact, it's going to be almost impossible at some points, but there are ways to get past that. There are ways to struggle beyond that and potentially suffer beyond that. That will then, you'll be able to transcend that and overcome it. And that thing that was challenging and difficult no longer is anymore. And that maybe there's not an upper limit to that. Maybe there is no limit where something is so challenging and so difficult that you can't do it. And if there is, you should try to find it and kind of introduce that behavior and that mindset in the context of something they already love. So maybe my idea of, if they don't want to play baseball because they're bad at it, I'm going to force them to do baseball is probably not a good idea. But maybe like, okay, great, you're nailing the violin. Let's do saxophone. This is a little more challenging. Yeah. Okay, good. So you see how you can be really good at one thing in music, but you can really struggle at something else in music. Maybe that's the thing you should really spend your time on. Because it's rewarding when you get past that. And again, maybe a 6-year-old is not going to appreciate that, but I think an 11 or a 12-year-old will.
Or a 20-something-year-old might as well. Like I think it'd be really nice if like my friends challenged me to improvise more often. I would definitely learn a lot more than do my rote performance or my rote practicing. So
What
I mean,
level of improvising do you do if any?
um, I've been improvising ragas lately.
Ooh, nice. I like
Yeah,
that. What's your
yeah.
favorite raga?
I actually don't know. I just listened and I enjoyed. I haven't gone into some deep listening into it yet.
You should check
What's
out.
your,
I love the raga called Lullit. Um,
how do you spell that?
Lalit. It's a flat second, a flat third, a flat fourth, a regular fourth, and then ambiguously either a sharp fourth or a flat five. There is no regular five. A flat sixth, and the sharp seventh.
Cool.
So it doesn't fit into any what we might think of as a
Really?
Western mode. Yeah,
Cool. That sounds really cool.
it's one of my favorites. It's like a 3 a.m. rag, and the ragamala that accompanies it, which is the ragamala is there's these historical paintings that are supposed to depict a scene that would be sort of at the encapsulation of the mood of the raga. The ragamala for this is a worker, a guy leaving early in the morning. The sun is not up, leaving his sleeping lover, and he's because he has to go to work, and he doesn't want to leave, but he has to, and he's kind of looking back longingly and lovingly at her. And so it's this idea of you're leaving something you love, but only temporarily, but still there's that bittersweet sense of loss, even though it's not forever, but there's that sense of loss in the moment. It's a beautiful rag. Ravi
Sounds
Shankar.
beautiful and intricate.
Yeah, I really like. I know that they're two sitar players, but I really love Ravi Shankar's renditions of it, and Nickel Banerjee also has some really incredible. I think there's only one on YouTube, but it's a
Wow.
absolutely incredible interpretation on that raga.
Amazing. I
And
have
it's
Ravi Shankar's open now, so I'll
cool.
listen to it when
Yeah,
we're through today.
please do. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's amazing. So what's your experience with like non-Western music or other instruments? And how does that affect your playing?
Um, I don't have too much experience, but I have been transcribing Armenian folk songs as of late.
Cool.
Uh,
Wow.
yeah, I really fell in love with this composer named Komidas, who is kind of like the Armenian version of Kodai or Bartok. Like he was
Oh
writing
wow.
down all of these songs, and they probably would have been lost in the genocide if he didn't write them down. So,
Can you spell that name?
it's Komitas.
Okay. Great. I'm gonna save this. I'll check this out.
Yeah, his music's really lovely, and like once you become familiar with some of the tunes, if you listen to contemporary Armenian musicians like Tigran Hamasayan,
Mm.
he's an amazing pianist. He incorporates some of those like folk melodies and modes into his playing, so it's really,
Absolutely love
really
Tigran.
yeah. I love like getting familiar with the language of music and then hearing someone who's a master, a contemporary master, really
Yeah.
execute it.
And it's cool to hear that Eastern European stuff. Eastern European stuff is such a silly phrase. Eastern European music, which I have very little experience with, but it seems to embrace asymmetrical time in a way that Western music tends not to.
Yeah.
Or at least it took Western music a long time to embrace those things. You brought up Kadai. Kadai tends to embrace sort of switching time signatures a lot and using a lot of fives and stuff like that, sevens. Of course, he was also in that Eastern European tradition. There's a guitarist named David Maximychik who he's on the like instrumental prog metal end. He is Serbian, and his music is all over the place as far as time goes. And I've read the transcripts of a few interviews, and he talks about how his sense of time comes directly from his experience with traditional Serbian music. And so it's not only fascinating to hear just different sort of tonal landscapes, but also temporal landscapes. I really love like things like metal, and I really love like math metal and stuff, and so I have been sort of steeping my brain in these sort of asymmetrical time sensibilities for a long time, but I still have this draw to just sort of feel everything in four, and listening to stuff like that. It's like, I love that I can't just sit there and tap a beat to it. I actually really like that. It's so disconcerting in a really pleasant way.
Yeah, it kind of pushes your expectations out the window. Like, you're no longer you're not thinking about dominant centers anymore. You're thinking more about like the movement or actuations. Yeah, that stuff is amazing. I really want to play more of it.
Yeah. Saturday when we spoke, I brought up Pete Davis. Did you get a chance to listen to any of his stuff?
Yeah, dude.
Did you listen to the Pottsville Conglomerate?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I really enjoyed it.
It's nuts.
I think that it's incredible that he's just like self-taught and he can make that happen.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about before, like hearing music that you don't think that you would be able to reproduce. Like, I know you had said that you tried to sit down with it and it took you like 45 minutes to just figure it out. So
about a 20-second chunk, by the way, not an entire song, just a small little breakdown.
Yeah. So I mean, it goes to show that like these musicians don't necessarily need formal training; they just need experience sometimes, and that trains their ear to make music the way that they want to hear it.
I think regardless of whether you're like an academy trained musician or not, I think that when it begins to become genuine is when it becomes instinctual. Yeah.
There's also something to be said about like contemporary singer-songwriters. I think that's like that's a medium of music that we tend to neglect a lot, especially like because in the classical sphere we have like the art song. But in actuality, like in the time that we've been alive, there have been a lot of singer-songwriter renaissances with like protest songs, and then also like now the Asian American singer-songwriter boom with like Mitski, Michelle Zauner, like all these Asian American first generation immigrant songwriters who are like portraying really dark and difficult music, but making it sweet and beautiful and like enjoyable to listen to. Like, I think that's like the same thing as art songs. That's what their function was.
Yeah, you're right. I think that idea of like somebody who is just a singer-songwriter, I think I think there is even a little bit of scorn, I think, that comes from sort of the academic side of music towards someone like that. And this kind of relates to the whole four chords fallacy of like, it's a bit of a trope, and obviously this is not going to be true across the board, but it is relatively true that harmonically, singer-songwriter stuff tends to be a little bit just basic. But that doesn't mean that it's not valuable, that it's not worth paying attention to and listening to multiple times. What are your thoughts about this idea of like harmonic complexity being the hallmark of music that is sort of more worthy or just more of a higher quality?
Yeah, I think that is a fallacy. It's not true. I think that if you want to talk about compositional techniques, you cannot exclude color and production and contemporary vehicles like digital audio workstations as separate from the composition themselves. So if you take like a Sufjan Stevens song or something, there's actually a shitload of complexity in that music.
Oh, 100%.
Down to the lyrics, all the way up to the production and the layering and the fading and all these things. Those things are compositional techniques, in my opinion. I don't think that you can exclude them. And we need to work our way out of this mindset that like music that has a little bit of harmonic complexity is considered better or something. It's not.
Or that the person who writes that kind of thing is a more learned and skilled and creative person. I think that's really what it gets down to me, that the more that it's a reflection of the level of creativity that's displayed. That if you have this super complicated approach to harmony, that again somehow it's a reflection of the the level of creativity that the composer displays. And yet there's a reason.
To
Go
me
ahead.
it's like it's elite and rich to say
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's true for most forms of music, actually.
Mm-hmm. And you know, one of the more complicated forms of composition that was developed in the 20th century was 12-tone composing. Guess what? No one does anymore.
12-tone composing.
Exactly. It's super complicated, but no one fucking liked it.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I'm sorry. I appreciate the complexity. I appreciate the originality, and I appreciate someone who goes out of their way to go, I want to create a new way of organizing harmony. I love that. I think that's awesome. That result, though, is just not compelling to people.
Mm.
You know, people were writing.
At least to the majority of people. Like, maybe it's compelling to the musicians that love that style.
Yeah.
Or understand that language.
And it's somewhat compelling to me in a certain way. Like, if I go to see someone's recital and they're going to play some Schoenberg, I am not going to walk out of the room, and I probably will enjoy it. It's not something that I'm going to go out of my way on my own time to listen to, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think Schoenberg is already antiquated music, though. Like, I wouldn't even consider that contemporary. Like, you want to talk about a composer that's doing that nowadays, look at, like, Jason Eckert or something like that. He's, like, making thrasher metal atonal compositions for Claire Chase to play on the flute. Like, that's fucking insane. It sounds wild. Like, and every time I've heard it, I've been like, oh, I'm so floored. I can't take it. It's
cool.
fucking crazy.
That's cool.
It's insane. But, like, the majority of people still don't really enjoy that. But, like, it's been taken to new levels. So
fair enough. Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the next musical aesthetic as it was claimed to be at the time. I mean, at the time, Schoenberg himself was saying, in 100 years, the only music that will be made will be 12-tone. His critics, well, some of his critics were saying the same thing. You know, this guy's a genius. He's going to change the way the West writes music, and they were wrong. It's not the way we write music. In fact, if anything, music has gotten more diatonic in the West as time has gone on. Especially in the pop end, I should say, especially in the pop end. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
What,
No, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it could have been that way if, like, we had adopted Marxism and all become communists and
potentially,
yeah, maybe, who knows.
yeah. Well, I mean, at least looking in the Soviet Union, it seems like they were somewhat drawn to a little more creative approaches to harmony. I mean, you know, Shostakovich was the darling of the Soviet Union, and his approach to harmony it's not very diatonic in some cases. And when it is diatonic, it's what's that?
Yeah. The same thing with Scriabin.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Scriabin, dude, that guy thought that he could create. You know about the Magnum Mysterium? I think that's what it's called, the Magnum Mysterium. Yeah, he literally thought that he could bring about. He could open a rift to another dimension, invite the shadow. Invite the shadow of our dimension into it to destroy our dimension and bring about a new phase of existence. I mean, this guy.
He's a fucking alien. Anyone that doesn't know what that is, he was essentially making what would you call it? Like an organ that spits out colors and
something like that.
He had planned this crazy orchestration that was going to happen at the top of a mountain. And he was going to have, like, LED lights flying off his organ. Mind you, this is happening, like, at the turn of the century.
Yeah. Like, it's like 1920s,
this
I
guy
think.
was really next level. He was on some other shit. He was on another wave.
Well, he was also, I mean, it's I think a little, it's not really correct to say that the Magnum Mysterium was even a piece of music, because he was also, you know, writing choreography. He was writing all kinds of crazy rituals. I don't think he ended up writing anything down, but he was going to write down all these rituals that were going to happen. He in fact stated there would be no audience. Everyone in attendance would be involved. This was not a performance. This was not art for him. This was a ritual.
This is Insane Clown Posse.
This is like Insane Clown Posse. It's all a big circle. This is awesome. This is great. Yeah, but I mean, his whole thing was that there is no spectator to this. This was not art. He literally believed that he was weaving a spell, a ritual, to bring about the end of our dimension. And I think he actually used the word dimension. There's a really great Lovecraft novel called short story, I should say, called The Music of Eric Zan that I think was actually based off of Scriabin. I don't know that for sure, but that story has a lot to do with there's a lot of similarities between Eric Zahn, who's this composer, and Scriabin's, the way people responded to Scriabin's music, as it's this sort of this some of his music, I should say, most of his, the sort of music that Scriabin is known for, the way people responded to it was like, this sounds like it's from another planet. It's not even that it's weird. It's not even that it's strange. It's not from here. It's from somewhere. It's just not from here. And so the short story is there's this guy who's like playing music from other dimensions, and he's sort of summoning these elder gods. But I don't know how well that all lines up, but it's a fascinating little thing.
Scriabin. I think it's insane. Like we underestimate like how creativity can draw us to those places of mania and chaos.
Mm-hmm.
But Joe, why don't we wrap up soon?
Okay.
And I could play another piece for you.
That would be awesome.
A piece off of the record, actually.
I would love that.
And maybe while I'm washing my hands, do you think that you could introduce the concept that you had told me about, like your music as one? I don't remember how you phrased it. But
yeah.
I think that would be a really cool thing to address, like before we go, because I think that was a really brilliant insight that you had.
Yeah. So the whole idea behind having these conversations, which I hope I have many more, including with you. There's no reason to do this only once. Is being a musician is already a pretty lonely life. We spend so much time by ourselves, especially if you have a career like you do, which is it's just you. You're not playing chamber music. You're not playing with orchestras. It's just, you're going on solo tours and you're recording solo albums and you're spending time by yourself. And there is something rewarding about that process, but we all want to play with other people. I mean, I feel really comfortable in saying every musician just wants to play with other people in addition to being by themselves. So it's already a really lonely existence. And to top it all off, we have a global pandemic that's closing venues and that's canceling tours. And, we have social distancing and you live in a different state than me. If you lived in Denver, I would have loved to have this in person. Even if you live in Denver, we'd still be doing this over Zoom, which, honestly, not as great as sitting across the desk from you. And so I feel like, especially for myself, at least for myself, my musical world has been reduced to a population of one. It's just me. And it's nice to see people posting stuff on Facebook and, you're putting out an album. I'm going to listen to that. My brother put out an album. It's cool to see people still doing stuff, but it's not the same as being musically connected to someone in the moment. And so in as much as this can be a replacement for that, I think it's really important to keep up conversations with people about music. Not just as a way to be like, oh, it's cool, you have an album, let's promote that. But, I have a lot more to learn about music. I can't come up with every idea, and I'm sure I have a lot of bad ones. And I want to expand the population of my musical world to at least more than one. And I think having these conversations right now is really important. We didn't really talk about it a lot today, but one of the things that I am really interested in talking to people about is how we are adapting our musical lives to this new scenario of not being able to collaborate with people in the way that we used to. So yeah, that's the idea of I want to expand the population of my musical world, and if I can expand other people's populations as well, then that is an added benefit beyond just myself. I want to feel more connected than I am. I don't feel very connected to. I don't feel as connected as I used to with musicians that I'm very close to. And
well, I'm sorry you're feeling that way, but I couldn't have said that more beautiful or more eloquently than you just did. And I actually think that you should preface every one of these interviews or podcasts that you do with that exact sentiment, because I resonate with that so much. And as you said, like, I'm usually by myself anyways because I'm a soloist, but it's even worse now because I don't even have the choice. So yeah, I just think that you're really touching on something that a lot of people are feeling. And on top of that, just people in general right now are really struggling. And having these conversations and opening the door for people to voice their opinions and thoughts and feelings, like, it's so important. So I
The last thing that I want is for someone to abandon music because of this whole situation. And I see that as something that's actually quite likely. Um, this conversation has been really encouraging for me. And I hope maybe it's been encouraging for you.
it really has.
People need so little encouragement, and we just don't get it. And I'm not, maybe I'd be, okay. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't encouraged. I'd be a little more encouraged if 1,000 people were watching this right now, but ultimately it's not really up to that. I mean, I'm so happy to hear, that you're still doing things, that you're still working, and that you're still being creative despite the fact that, the world fucking ended. Um, and, that can't be true of only you. Right. So, I just want to get a little deeper into that with people. And if at the end of the day, no one listens to this, that doesn't really matter. I've learned so much from you already. And you've changed my thought process on some things, even just in the space of a couple hours. And I can't say that for a lot of the experiences I've been having lately. So, I really appreciate your time.
I feel the same way. Yeah, I feel the same way.
Thanks. Yeah.
I'm
It's
really
great to hear.
appreciative.
Great. Cool.
Yeah. I'm
What
gonna
do
go
you,
wash my hands really quick,
great.
and then when I return, I'm gonna play a piece by one of my closest friends. His name is Max Vinetz,
Okay.
and the piece is entitled Velvet Ripple.
Velvet Ripple. Love that. I'll try to fill up some time while you're doing that. Yeah. Well, if anyone is watching, or will watch this in the future, Joseph's social media links are in the description. His album will be out by the end of this month, and when that happens, I will post relevant links in the description. Please consider purchasing a copy. Don't just listen to it. If you go stream it from somewhere, that's really great. But streaming services really don't pay musicians, especially if you're not getting millions and millions and millions of hits a day. What really helps is buying albums and trying to support people in any way that you can. If you think there are people out there who really love Joseph's music, which there are, make sure you share. Go check out his YouTube. Go like his stuff. Leave him comments. Tell him how much you support him. This guy is really incredible, and he really deserves a bigger following than he has. If you know anyone that you think I should talk to, please let me know. I want to talk to anybody, everybody. It doesn't have to be classical music. I'm talking to my brother this weekend about his new EP, which is like rock and soul. It's really cool. Talking to Katie Wary, the flautist, on Thursday. She is the person who runs the Etude of the Week Facebook group and website, which is now over 6,000 members strong. She's also a private teacher and is frequently asked to play concerts, etc. And Joseph's back. And this is really great. I'm so glad that we get some music today. This is fantastic. Joseph, will you give us one more time the name of the composer and the name of the piece?
Yeah, of course. This piece is entitled Velvet Ripple, and it's by a composer named Max Vinetz. And I think Max did an excellent job of utilizing the entire range of my instrument in this piece. He has me playing literally the highest and lowest notes possible. So,
wow, wonderful. Well, I think
really took on the challenge, and I think he did an awesome job with it.
Shout out to Max. Joseph, thank you again. I think after you finish playing, that will be the end of the stream, and I really hope we do more of these. This has been a really, really amazing experience. I can't think of a better way to spend 2.5 hours on a Monday. All right.
Oh, Joe, could I trouble you to mute your mic while I'm playing too?
Yeah, I will do
Okay,
that.
cool. Because I think on Zoom, if another noise comes through, it mutes the noise for me.
All right, muting my mic now.
Cool. All right. So this is Velvet Ripple, and I commissioned this from Max. He finished it for me in early June, so it's still a pretty fresh piece. I recorded it on Friday, and you'll be able to hear it on my record, New Music with Brahms Guitar, Volume 1, which was funded by the Illinois Arts Council through their Independent Artist Grant.
Joseph, that was absolutely gorgeous, dude. Thank you so much. That was
Thank you.
fantastic. That was fantastic. All right, man. I really appreciate it. Let's do this again soon. For anyone else who's listening, again, please go follow Joseph on social media. Links are down below.